Good evening, shalom and salam alaikum. What am I going to talk about? A little bit about me, my lifetime history of weight, then the science behind body weight. That's what caused Jackie to say that this is a very technical presentation. All the science you need to know everybody has done who went to school in this country. And then finally, I've got some advice on reducing your weight. I have no advice at all on healthy eating. And the reason is very simple. You can have the healthiest diet in the world and get fat. You can have the most unhealthy diet in the world and get thin. You might die of malnutrition, but you will die thin. It all depends on how much you eat. This is the first time I can remember ever putting my A-level subjects onto a slide about myself. And the reason is simply to remind myself and you that when it comes to talking about science, I do actually know what I'm talking about. And for over 30 years, I've read every issue of Scientific American magazine, which is a layman's magazine, but actually covers some quite interesting things like quantum physics and so on. And a lot of what I write is on my website. There's already a website page about how to reduce your weight, which is quite easy to find from the home page on my website. And provided the technology works, this presentation will also end up on the website. So my history of weight. Like most Muslim mothers and most Jewish mothers, my mother absolutely doted on me. And I was always chubby. In fact, I had a nickname. Most kids have nicknames. And my nickname when I was young was Fatty. My best friend from my childhood days is here to affirm that that is true. Yes. And when I was 16, I weighed 12 stone, 76 kilos, which is actually a lot of weight for a 16-year-old. I then, in my mid-20s, actually got fit. I had an Indian doctor friend, and we liked playing squash. We found that booking a squash court for just the two of us for 45 minutes wasn't long enough, and we used to book 2 squash courts consecutively, so we would play 90 minutes of continuous flat-out squash. And that's the fittest I've ever been in my life. When I got married, I had a 32-inch waist. I don't know what my height was, my weight was, but I reckon it was about 10 stone. By the age of 62, my weight had slowly but steadily crept up to 87 kilos. For years and years, I pretended to be dieting while slowly my weight went up. I have a medical every year. When I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers, the firm used to pay for it, and after I retired from PwC, I carried on having a medical with the same doctor, except that I pay for it now. And the key thing was the medical that I had in July of 2013. For the first time ever, I had elevated blood glucose. My blood glucose reading was 7. The units don't matter. And
that was the fasting, wasn't it?
That was fasting blood glucose. The proper way. You don't eat overnight, you haven't eaten for 24 hours, etc. It's what doctors want to measure. And it was worrying, so the first thing what the doctor said was, let's just make sure this is not a fluke. 2 weeks later, we measured it again, and in fact, it was just very slightly higher at 7.2. And the reason that matters is quite simple. The normal range for blood glucose using these units is between 4 and 6. If it's below 4, it's too low. If it's 0, you're probably dead. Above 6, between 6 and 7, is what's called elevated blood glucose, and that's considered bad, but not catastrophic. Above 7 is classified as type 2 diabetes. So I was exactly on the borderline of type 2 diabetes with a reading of 7. 7.2 actually puts you into type 2 diabetes. And that was pretty bad news. I'd always known the theory that people from a South Asian ethnicity have a strong predisposition to type 2 diabetes, but every year my annual medical had always been fine, so I never worried about it. Well, now I had genuine reason for worry. And there's a medicine for type 2 diabetes, which Johnny's going to talk about, called metformin. I was prescribed that. It didn't agree with me, but also I didn't fancy being medicated for the rest of my life. And I knew, both from previous reading and also because my doctor, because he knew I was interested in this stuff, gave me a copy of a peer-reviewed paper from the New England Journal of Medicine, that two things can help your blood sugar to reduce it. And they're independent. Although one of them is exercise, and one of them is losing weight. Exercise, by the way, might help you lose weight, but these are independent factors for reducing your blood sugar. So I set out to lose weight. And the doctor who runs a diabetes clinic in Kcal for the NHS was extremely skeptical about whether I would really lose weight. I mean, remember, he'd been doing my medicals for about the previous 10 years. He's seen my weight steady or slowly going up. He did not believe that I could lose any meaningful amount of weight. You know, he said to me, I mean, it'd be great if you can lose 5% of your weight, but the honest answer is he didn't believe I could do it. This is what happened next. July 2013, I was 87 kilos. July 2014, 1 year later, I was 63.5 kilos. And that number matters, and I'll explain why in a moment, because that was my target. And you can see that my weight went down in a straight line. That very sort of wiggly line is a graph of my weight day by day. The brown line is a 10-day moving average. If you're an accountant, you tend to put things into a spreadsheet, so I started putting my weight into a spreadsheet. Once it was in a spreadsheet, the most obvious thing in the world to an accountant is to work out a moving average. So that's why my spreadsheet has a 10-day moving average as well. And the great thing is that that was July 2014, almost 2.5 years ago. And you can see that since then, my weight has basically been in control. It's gone up a bit, it's gone down a bit, and if we had time, I could talk you through every one of those sort of rises and what was the circumstances at the time, why it went up, but we don't have time for that. But the key thing is that my weight is under control, and I'm confident that it will be under control for the rest of my life. But,
can you just
yeah?
translate 87 kilograms in stones and pounds?
No. I went metric a long time ago. I gave you 10 stone. 10 stone is about sort of 63, 64 kilos.
Yes.
But I went metric a long time ago, and I'm staying metric. And there's a good reason why, by the way, I'll show you in a moment. If you want to weigh in stones, that's fine. It doesn't affect your weight. But the key thing, there's a saying in politics, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And the same goes with weight. The price of controlling your weight is that you always have to be alert to the need to control your weight for life. And I expect to be weighing myself every single day for the rest of my life. Now, why 63.5? There's a unit that the medical profession used, the body mass index. And it's your weight in kilograms divided by the square of your height in meters. That's one very good reason for being metric. Obviously, you can work out your BMI starting with a weight in stones and starting with a height in feet, but the first thing you have to do is to convert the stones and the feet into kilograms and meters, because BMI is defined metrically. And the medical profession has a range for sort of ordinary people. The green range goes from 18.5 to 25. That is normal. If you're above 25, you're overweight. And if you're above 30, you are obese. Those are the definitions that the doctors use. And below 18.5, you're too thin. So I wanted a target somewhere in the normal range. And I could have picked any number between 18.5 and 25. But 18.5, I didn't fancy trying to be a size 0 model. And 25 didn't seem to have much safety margin in, because if you get even slightly heavier, you're then overweight. So being an accountant, I said, I'm going to go exactly midway, 21.75. That is halfway between 18.5 and 25. So if you want your body mass index to be 21.75, you know your height. My height was 1.71 meters. And you don't need a degree in maths, even though I've got one, to work out the value of t in that equation. And t is 63.5. And that's why that was my target. When I told my doctor that's my target, he just laughed at me. You know, he just did not believe at all that I could ever achieve it. Because that involved losing about a quarter of my weight. So I said we were going to cover the science behind weight. And the science is very simple. The one key thing you need to know is that energy is conserved. People talk about energy all the time. Energy, I still remember the definition from school days, the power to do work. And there are lots and lots of different units for measuring energy, but there are only two good ones. One of them is the joule, which is the standard metric MKS scientific measurement for energy. And I'm not going to talk through the details of the definition, but basically, if you have a force of 1 Newton, you push it for 1 meter, you have done 1 joule's worth of work. The other unit, which is commonly used, although this is a bit sort of outmoded, is the calorie, spelt with a small c. And the calorie is the amount of heat energy that you need to take 1 gram of water and to raise its temperature by 1 degree Celsius. And a calorie is a very small unit of energy. So most of the time, people work with 1,000 calorie units, which sometimes they write as a calorie with a big C, but more often these days, they call it a kilocalorie, a Kcal. And the science is that energy is conserved. That's all there is to it. If you take any system that is capable of storing energy, a system that energy can be put into and energy can be taken out of, energy is conserved. And if the input energy is more than the output energy, it gets stored. And if the output energy is more than the input energy, then the system must be sending energy out. It must be running down its storage. And exactly the same applies to your body. You take energy in by eating, and you use energy by living. Simply by existing, you use energy. If you just lay on your bed all day and didn't do anything, you would still be using energy because you produce heat, your body stays warm. Oddly enough, 20% of all the energy we use is used by our brain. So thinking actually uses a lot of energy. And we have 2 storage mechanisms for energy. One is the glycogen store, which is storing energy in your bloodstream and in your liver, and this is the short-term store. This is why, if you have a big meal, your weight can shoot up the following day. It's not because you've gained lots of fat. You've stored this energy in glycogen. Glycogen needs a lot of water to store that as well, and so your weight has gone up. But the key thing is that you've just been storing energy as glycogen. The long-term store is body fat, all over the place. And so to increase your weight is quite simple. You take more energy in than you use, and your weight will go up. And to reduce weight is also very simple. You use more energy than you're taking in, and your weight will go down. It's irrelevant what you're eating. All that matters is the amount of energy that you're taking in. You could have a diet that consisted of eating nothing but raw sugar, pure sugar. And provided you ate a sufficiently small amount, your weight would go down to any level of weight that you wanted, provided you keep the sugar intake low and don't eat anything else. Long before you get there, you probably die of malnutrition. But the point is that it doesn't matter what you eat, what matters is your energy input.
I'd slightly differ, and I still say which you're saying that it does matter what you eat, but if you're
Yeah, because
your target is weight
if you have a diet of 100%,
yeah.
if you have a diet of 100% sugar, you can lose weight. It's not good for you; it'll kill you. You can have a diet that is super healthy, all the good stuff that Jackie was talking about, and if you eat too much of that good stuff, you will get fatter and fatter and fatter. The only thing that matters to you, as far as your weight is concerned, is energy in and energy out. So how many calories a day do you need, or how many kilocalories a day do you need? It depends on your lifestyle. If you look at the guidance, they used to say 2,500 for men doing strenuous manual work. Nobody does strenuous manual work these days. A normal sort of traditional answer is 2,000, although I think at 2,000 calories a day, I probably gain weight. Different people process food more efficiently, less efficiently. There's no right answer other than what you work out for yourself by trial and error. The other odd thing is that the more you weigh, the more calories you need per day just to stay at that weight. So if you've got somebody, the red blob, who's actually pretty fat, that person needs a high level of calories per day just to stay at that weight. Because the bigger you are, the fatter you are, the more energy you need, the more heat you generate, etc. So if that person reduces their daily calorie intake, that red person reduces their daily calorie intake and keeps it level at some lower amount than they were eating before, their weight will go down to the yellow blob. And then it will stay there, assuming that person doesn't change their lifestyle anymore, because they reduce their calories input to a level that balances their weight in relation to where they are. If they want to get to the green, they need to cut it down again. And that's why when you start dieting and controlling your calorie intake, you will find that initially you lose weight and then you stop losing weight. And the answer to that is you reduce your calorie intake again and make it even lower. That's the only way to get your weight down to where you want it to be. You have to keep cutting your calorie intake or raising your calorie output until you get to where you want to be. But as we'll see in a minute, controlling your energy output is a lot harder than controlling your input. So now, some practical advice on reducing weight. And I'm not going to give you, by the way, any advice on which types of food, because I don't care. All that matters is input and output. As I said, losing weight is very simple. Your energy input needs to be less than your energy output. So you either reduce the input, or you increase the output, or you do both. Something worth knowing, 1 kilogram of body fat is 7,700 calories. So if you've had a binge meal and the following day you're a kilogram higher, there is absolutely no way that you ate 7,700 calories in that binge meal. 7,700 calories is an incredible amount of calories. It's the glycogen that put you up there. But actually, in the long run, of course, what the body will be storing if you keep overeating is fat. And if you overeat even 30 calories a day, you will just keep gaining weight all the time. Because your input is always 30 calories higher than your output, that extra 30 calories has got to be stored. And the body will store it initially as glycogen, then it will store it as fat. If you undereat your calorie intake by 500 kilocalories a day, in other words, you're using 500 calories a day more in your daily living, doesn't matter whether you're running or walking or lying down flat on the bed, provided you're using 500 calories more every day than your input, in 15 days you will be short 7,500 calories, and 7,500 calories is almost exactly 1 kilogram. And that graph of mine was 2 kilograms per month. So I must have been under-eating about 500 calories a day. And actually, I kept a running total in my head every day of what I was eating. I never bothered writing it down. Mental arithmetic is quite easy. You're not trying to get it down to the exact number of calories, but roughly to the nearest few hundred, how many calories am I eating? And so I was aware that I was eating about 500 calories a day less than I was using. And the graph proves that I was right. Increasing the output is really hard. There's a website which tells you how many calories you use for particular kinds of activity. And for input, it wants to know your age, it wants to know your weight, because different people use different amounts of calories. So a big, heavy, fat guy walking a mile uses a lot more calories than a small, thin guy. And putting in my own age and weight, if I walk for 60 minutes at 2.5 miles an hour, so some imperial units for you now, if I walk for 60 minutes at 2.5 miles an hour, I've used 161 kilocalories roughly. If I walk at 5 miles an hour, which is a lot faster, I use 444 calories, because that is more strenuous. When I go swimming, I tend to do recreational backstroke. I just lie on the back and swim. And in 1 hour, you use 284 calories. Now, the thing is that 161 calories are in 2 biscuits, which is why reducing your input is much easier. And there's a saying in the property world, the only thing that matters about the value of property is location, location, location. Whereas, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that matters with weight is calories, calories, calories. If you count your daily calorie intake and reduce it, well, the first thing that will happen is that you feel hungry. And I had to recognize that if I was going to lose weight, I had to face up to feeling hungry occasionally. I was one of these guys who used to eat in case I felt hungry later. I wasn't hungry when I was eating, but I was eating something as a precaution against feeling hungry later on. It's no wonder I was 87 kilograms. And there are some things you can eat lots of if the thing you're eating is low in calories. This is the only food I'm going to mention. And the reason I'm going to mention broccoli, I can see how they're wincing, is that you can chomp and chomp and chomp on broccoli. It's hard work eating broccoli. And you need to eat 400 grams of broccoli, which is one sort of big head of broccoli, to get 100 calories in. So you can eat almost unlimited amounts of broccoli. But you just need to become an expert on calories.
What about cauliflower?
Cauliflower is probably similar, but I haven't actually checked. I mean, I know for broccoli, because I eat broccoli regularly. I don't know the answer for cauliflowers, but it's probably sort of pretty low. Now, packaged food, most foods are packaged. And I made the ultimate sacrifice as part of preparing this talk. I went to Sainsbury's and I bought a packet of biscuits, which I have no intention of eating, because I don't like eating biscuits because they're too high in calories. But I bought it so I could take its picture, or scan it. And it's got some nutritional information. Pardon?
Could take a picture while you were there.
No, I wanted a really good quality scan. So, I mean, I had to put I put the biscuits on the scanner, then I had to weigh them down with books to get a good scan. So that nutritional information is hard to read, but I also scanned the label itself. And this label tells you that in one cookie there are 88 calories. So all the work is done for you. The manufacturer is telling you there are 88 calories per biscuit.
Sorry, I was only going to mention 4 gram. I know I keep hopping back to sugar, but 4 gram of sugar is a teaspoon. So again, have in mind that when you're looking at labels, the sugar.
Yeah, there's lots of useful information on labels. When it comes to losing weight, the only number that matters is the calories. If you're trying to eat healthily, then yes, look at the amount of sugar, look at the amount of salt, all of that kind of stuff. But for weight, there's only one number you need to think about, and that is the calories. And which is harder? Not eating 2 biscuits or walking for an hour at 2.5 miles an hour? Because that's your choice. You can not eat 2 biscuits, or you can walk for the mile. That's why it is so much easier to lose weight simply by reducing your input. The other thing that is useful to have is a nutritional scale. We were quite lucky. My wife, when she was in Lidl, we shop in Lidl when we're in London quite often, she saw they had a special offer. For £10 they were selling nutritional scales. And a nutritional scale is a scale which not only weighs things, but if you type in the code, and it comes with a code book, it's got codes for all different kinds of food, you type in the code and it tells you not just how much that bit of food on the scale weighs, but how many calories are in there. And the reason why that was so useful is that we eat a lot of curries. So one day when my wife was cooking, I weighed everything that went into a cook pot. I calculated how many calories were in that, and then right, and then we worked out how many meals were in the curry that she made. Because in London and in Manchester, she regularly cooks freezes for me. So she'll make a whole load of lentil curry, for example, and then divide it up into Tupperware containers where one container is for one meal. And we found, for example, that 1 meal's worth of lentils was 160 calories. 1 meal's worth of chicken curry was 360 calories. 200 calories difference. So by itself, that told me you will almost never eat chicken curry and you regularly eat lentil curry, because you're saving 200 calories every time you make that choice.
And then there's less protein, surely, because chicken gives you protein.
Lentils are full of protein. And you eat meat occasionally. I mean, as Jackie said, you know, red meat, sort of 3 meals a week out. In 7 days, you eat 21 meals. So out of those 21, if you eat 2 or 3 with chicken or beef, that's more than enough. The other thing, as I said, price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Weigh yourself, and I believe in weighing myself every single day, because what gets measured gets done. You need a good quality digital scale so that it weighs you reliably. You need to be consistent, so you weigh yourself at the same time each day, wearing the same clothes, and at the same stage in your routine. For example, I weigh myself in my pyjamas and my shirt after I've had breakfast, after I've been to the bathroom. You weigh yourself and then you write it down, because your memory is unreliable. Memory will cheat on you. What you've written down, you can't falsify. And none of us are perfect. We have lapses. I had a big lapse yesterday. My wife and I, we ate in a pub, and then we ate at Euston Station. And then when we got home, I decided to have the pizza that my son had as well. So yesterday, it was all over the place. My weight went up today for that reason.
Well, we're all went to Lisbon.
Lisbon, I gained weight. Perfection is impossible. You go to weddings, you go to other celebrations. Don't beat yourself up. Don't feel over guilty about it. And don't try to compensate by starving yourself to death the day after. It doesn't work. Just go back to your regular low-calorie lifestyle and the weight will go down. You saw that graph, how there were periods when the weight goes up and then it just goes back down. The key thing is that if you stick to your regular lifestyle, your weight will go down. If you eat out a great deal, and sometimes I have phases in London where I'm out a lot, then start to make choices about what's in front of you. We often have no control at a set black tie dinner. What lands in front of you, you have a complete choice about what you eat. So if you leave the potatoes, there's a lot of calories there. You don't put the butter on the bread, you're saving calories there. You either don't eat the dessert or you eat half the dessert. And I've got into the habit of halving the dessert before I start eating it, because otherwise when I start at one end of a piece of cheesecake, you tend to keep going until you get to the other end. But if you've halved it first, you know what you're allowed to eat. So that's it, basically. Any questions?